Hi, I'm Nick McLeod from the One Mile Bakery in Cardiff. Welcome to the Whiz Kids Cook Along. We're going to be doing 4 amazing recipes for you to cook for you and your families. So our next recipe, guys, we are going to make some amazing fluffy homemade scones. A really simple recipe actually, one that often people find quite difficult, but hopefully this one is foolproof. So today we're going to be using my trusty friend, the food mixer. If you haven't got a food mixer and you've got a food processor, you can definitely use that to do the job as well, or you can absolutely use the old school method of rubbing the butter and flour together in your fingers. But to try and keep things as simple as possible, we're going to use the machinery that we've got. Also, to save on the washing up, we're going to try and do as much as we can in the one bowl. So I'm going to get my food mixer bowl and I'm going to pop it on the scales. This is going to make 8 really nice chunky scones, or scones, depending on where you're from. And for that, we're going to use self-raising flour, 450 grams. First of all, we're going to weigh out all our dry ingredients, and then separately we're going to do our wet mix. So we've got 450 grams of self-raising flour. We want to add a little pinch of salt. So in our bowl at the moment we've got our flour and salt. We also need to add 1 teaspoon of baking powder to give that extra little bit of lift. We're using self-raising flour, but that'll just help to make them really nice and light and fluffy. Finally, here we've got 80 grams of caster sugar. So I popped those in the mixing bowl and I'm going to give them a very quick mix together. And then I'm going to add my soft butter. Now I'm adding soft butter here and it'll come together really nicely, and we're looking for a sandy texture. If your butter is cold, that makes it a lot more difficult, certainly if you're rubbing it in your fingers and also in a food mixer like this. But if you are using a food processor and you've got that sharp blade, that will work through the cold butter a lot easier. But if your butter's room temperature, it makes things easier. So in goes the butter. I've just broken it up into smaller chunks, but it is nice and soft. And then, as I said, we'll let the mixer do the hard work for us. So we're just going to leave our mixer running until the butter's worked its way into the flour, until we've got a nice sandy texture, no big lumps of butter. Great, so I'm happy with that. No big chunks of butter, really nice and soft textured, and that nice sort of sandy texture we're looking for. Dry ingredients done, we can move on to our wet. So for our wet ingredients, we're looking for 300 grams in total for the 450 grams of flour we've used. We're using crème fraiche for a little bit of indulgence. That's going to make our scones lovely and rich and almost cakey. And buttermilk. The acidity in the buttermilk will help react with the bicarb and give our scones real lift. But you could use a combination of different things. Natural yogurt, buttermilk, cream, crème fraiche, milk will all give you the same end result. I'm using a combination of crème fraiche and buttermilk, and we want 150 grams of each. In with the crème fraiche. And the same amount of buttermilk. Quick wash of the hands. Now what else we're going to add to that, which might seem a little bit strange, is just a splash of vinegar. The vinegar again is going to help react with the bicarb and hopefully give us real lightness. You're not going to taste the vinegar, but it will help that lift in the scones. Just a teaspoon. And then finally, but this is an optional extra, is some lemon zest. I love that real lemony kick that you get in a scone. And that's it. That's all there is to our wet ingredients. It's now just a case of combining the two together and bringing them together as lightly as we possibly can. We don't want to overwork the dough and tighten the scones up. We want to work them as little as possible. So that's our basic mix. Our wet ingredients done and our dry ingredients done, and that's going to make a delicious classic scone. Of course, there's lots of other things you could add to them. Spices, cinnamon, raisins, some fresh blueberries, loads of different things you could add into them to personalise them and make them amazing. But this is a really traditional classic scone. So really very simply, it's a case of combining the wet ingredients into the dry. And then again, I'm going to let the food mixer do the hard work and just bring it together, but on a slow speed and just until it combines. I'm then going to bring it out onto the work surface and give it a very light knead. So can you see there, the mixture's just started to clump together. It's not formed into a tight ball, it's just really combined into kind of a cohesive dough. That's all we're looking for. We're going to do the rest of the work with our hands. So I'm going to very lightly dust my work surface with flour. Turn the dough out onto the work surface. And then use my hands to do the last little bit of work. Very gently pushing on the dough, really trying to be as gentle as I possibly can, just to work this dough together. And then to keep this recipe as simple as possible, we're not even going to roll them out and make them into little individual ones. We're going to make this into this lovely round that I've got here, and then we're going to cut them into wedges. So just use the palm of your hand, flatten the dough out. A little dusting of flour as you go if you need it. And I've got a disc here which is about 6 inches across. Don't forget, we want a really nice thick scone, so it's probably 3 to 4 centimeters in height. Don't be tempted to push it down too flat or you'll get a flat scone. We want something really nice and tall. And then very simply, I'm going to cut this into wedges. In half again, and in half again. So we've got 8 lovely wedges. You want to make them try and be as even as possible in size so that they obviously bake at the same amount of time. Place these on our baking tray, and then we're going to glaze these with a beaten egg yolk. Not the full egg, because we want a really dark, rich glaze. And you can see those little flecks of lemon in there. So here we are, I've got my egg, I'm going to separate it. Make sure that yolk doesn't crack. And in between my fingers, I'm going to take the yolk into one bowl, and then we can leave the white for another time. Wash hands, and then just beat this egg yolk up and brush it nice and generously over the top of our scones. Try not to get it down the sides if you can help it. And this will give them a lovely, rich, dark crust on top. Really simple, okay? So these want to go into a really hot oven. My oven's set at 200 degrees fan, which is 220 conventional. And these are going to bake for about 15 minutes until nice and puffy and lovely and dark golden brown. So our scones have had 15 minutes and they're ready to come out of the oven. And look at those. Amazing, okay? Smells incredible. Lovely dark golden colour on top, lovely and light and fluffy, and the temptation is to dive in straight away. But we've got to wait, okay? Because if you dive into them now, they're still cooking in the middle, and if you open them up and they'll be a little bit doughy and spongy. Wait until these have cooled, and I promise it's worth the wait. And here we have them, the scones. We've waited, and I promise they're worth the wait. They smell incredible. They're so lovely and light. Got that lovely golden crust, just waiting to be tucked into. Jam and cream, cream and jam, it's up to you. Just break them open. Got that lovely smell of lemon, little flecks of lemon zest going through it. I'm going to go cream first, then a little bit of jam. Thanks so much for joining me again, guys. If you've enjoyed this recipe and you want to find out more, head to whizkids.org.uk for more recipes.